Let's get into the subject we left aside last week and that we asked at the end. Does the United States of America appear in Bible prophecy, or is it an invention? Let's start with this text, Revelation chapter 13, where it speaks of the two beasts. Two beasts, not one, because some people say or believe that it is only one. We saw and dealt with the first one. Now we are going to break down the second one. Let's read verses 11 and 12. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Do you remember who this beast was that receives a deadly wound and was healed? You do remember, don't you? Revelation 13:18. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, the famous 666. I anticipate you now. I don't think we may have time to deal with it today, because the subject of the United States and something else that we will deal with is a little bit more extensive. We will probably have to postpone it for the next conference. Well, let's see who this other beast is that came up out of the earth and had two horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. Here we have what the prophet could more or less see, a buffalo with two horns like this, similar to those of a lamb. Notice, the two-horned beast is not, therefore, part of the first beast. They are two different ones. What else do we see here now? Earth, where this beast comes from. It says it comes out of the earth. Do you remember where the previous one came from? Out of the sea, a place where there were many waters. And we come to the conclusion, by biblical evidence, and also by interpretation, that the sea is a multitude, many people. Then the earth must be precisely the opposite of many waters, few people, a new place. This second beast arises in the final moments of the first beast, the one that had received the mortal wound and was healed. The first beast disappears momentarily in 1798. We saw it last week. What happens to the papacy in 1798? Do you remember? General Berthier apprehends the Pope, takes him prisoner, where he dies in prison. And around that time is when this second beast arises. Let's see. Now that we have identified the space of time in which this second beast arises, who is it? What nation arose in those ups and downs of history? There was only one nation that arose in that time. Do you remember any nation? It is the United States of America. Will this be the beast, the second beast of the apocalypse? If we refer to a symbolic apocalyptic prophecy that speaks of Babylon, of which we are now going to make a very brief mention, because we have to leave it for later. Babylon means confusion, and is the symbol or representation of religious powers. A union of religious powers is a complicated thing. Based on this, what is the ruling religion in this country? So far, it has been key. Protestantism, which is the religion that rules in general in the United States. The foundations of the Constitution of the United States of America express precisely the clear separation between church and state. They are two different things. They cannot be united. Therefore, what happens with that? Religious freedom is guaranteed for all. But curiously enough, there is now a very strong pressure from Jews, Protestants, and Catholics who are pushing, saying that it is a misinterpretation of the Constitution that church and state are separated. This is tremendous. This had never been raised in the United States until a few years ago, and now this version is gaining more and more strength. Let's see, just a summary here. There are two horns similar to those of a lamb. What does that mean? Well, youth, innocence, meekness. We remember that the lamb was also a symbol of Christ. So what were the two horns of this beast? We saw that the horns were the kingdom itself. It is the character of its government and its two fundamental principles. America has always been based on republicanism and what else? Protestantism. These are the two pillars of this nation. But look now, what a tremendous change the United States has undergone. We are going to see a letter that is not to be missed, written in 1945 by Truman, who was the President of the United States to Cardinal Pacelli, the Pope of the time, at the end of the Second World War. Let's read it, and you will realize what the politics and thinking of that nation was, and how things have changed dramatically in a very short time. There is no waste in this letter. It reads, "Dear Mr. Pacelli, as a Baptist, which is the religion to which he belonged, and as chief executive of the greatest and most powerful nation in the world, in which everyone simply calls me Mr. Truman, I cannot address you as Your Holiness, a title belonging to God. This is the first stone he throws at you. We in the United States consider all men equal before God and address them by their true names. That is why I address you simply as Mr. Pacelli. The people who elected me their chief executive are a democratic, peace-loving nation. Therefore, it is my duty to seek the cooperation of those who have truly given proof of desiring peace and working for it, not those who cry peace and promote war. I do not believe that you or your church are among those who truly seek peace and work for it." What a stumbling block, too. In the first place, our forefathers, founders of this great nation, knowing from past history the nature of your political and war-loving church, made it a principle of our government not to allow your meddling in our governmental affairs. They learned this lesson well from European history, and therefore we are convinced that our democracy will last as long as we do not accept your meddling, as did the governments of Europe, which you entangled with your doctrines and political intrigues. See if it is clear. Democracy lasts until the Roman Catholic Church gets in there, and that has already happened. You will see. Thomas Jefferson, one of the wisest men in this country, said this very thing when he declared, "History shows us no example of any people run by the clergy having a civil and free government." And earlier, did you notice that the Pope spoke of religious freedom? Therefore, you are the last person in the world who can teach me how to lead my people on the path of peace. To refresh your memory, I will remind you of some facts. It was your predecessor in the Vatican, Pope Pius XI, who initiated the whole fascist aggression with the Lutheran treaties made with Mussolini in 1929, where we said that it marked the what? The moment when the mortal wound of the beast was healed, the Vatican was given back to the Pope and began to be a state. This was the beginning of the betrayal of Christian civilization. It was there the beginning of the horrors befalling Europe and the world, the consequences of which we are still suffering. A noted writer and historian of my country, Louis Munford, who is neither a communist nor a Catholic hater, wrote the following in his book Faith for Living, a book we published in 1940. The betrayal of the Christian world was clearly affected in 1929 with the Concordat, which was made between Mussolini and the Pope. He says further, unfortunately, the purposes of fascism are in profound conflict with those of a free republic such as the United States. In this work, the Catholic Church was an ally, a potent ally of the forces of destruction. At that time, few of us living in the United States knew the true nature of fascism as you and Pope Pius XII knew it, for it was you who encouraged and allied your church to it. You yourself were specially groomed as a young diplomatic priest of the Church for the specific purpose of helping Germany prepare for World War. You and the Kaiser in Switzerland were able to intrigue against the Allies during the First World War. You spent 12 years in Germany, where you took part in Hitler's rise to power. Having made agreements with him and with the execrable von Papen, a second pope who helped Hitler seize power, whose signature, like that of Eugenio, Cardinal Pacelli, together with Hitler's, is recorded in the Concordat with the Vatican, signed in 1933. No one will ever believe that you are unaware of the plot that Hitler and his Nazis were preparing against us. The Catholic biographer himself said that you, during those years, were the most well-informed man in the Reich. After the signing of the Concordat by you and von Papen and sprinkling holy water on Hitler, giving him the impression that he was resurrected, von Papen, who managed to escape from Nuremberg to the gallows, boasted in the following way: the Third Reich is the first power which not only recognizes, but puts into practice the high principles of the papacy. Your cardinals and bishops blessed in Rome the weapons of war of the soldiers sent against the defenseless Ethiopians. Your Cardinal Schuster of Milan proclaimed the robbery of Ethiopia as a holy crusade to bring triumph to Ethiopia, the cross of Christ. Meanwhile, you continue to call your church the Church of God and pretend that I, as the head of a civil state, admit that you are superior to me and to the people of the United States of America. You speak honeyed words about justice at the same time you are beating the drums for another war, perhaps more terrible than the last two against Russia, which helped us defeat Hitler and Mussolini. You are already inciting the United States to declare war on Russia as soon as possible, using the same methods that Hitler and Mussolini used to solidify their detestable, denying and impious regimes. You want us to waste our money and send our young men to a horrible death, that over the corpses of Hitler and Mussolini we finish the struggle which they started with your help and which we defeated. Yes, the United States of America wants peace, for of all nations we alone are left with any prosperity and decency. We are the bulwark of Protestant democratic freedoms. If we, or Protestant England, were weakened, your Catholic culture would have a chance to rule the world again by pushing it back to the Middle Ages. If we were to lose or weaken with the war you are provoking against Russia, you would easily seek an alliance with her. Your predecessor, Pope Pius V, publicly declared that he would make a pact with the devil himself if it suited the interests of his church. Therefore, Mr. Pacelli, it is my duty as head of this predominantly Protestant country to reject your proposals in the guise of an alliance, of a peace pact. Those who eat on the plate on which the devil is eating must use a very long spoon. I will continue my work to achieve and maintain peace as a good Baptist, preserving the honest Protestant principles that made our nation powerful and working for them. Yours sincerely, Harry S. Truman. I don't know what you think of this letter, but it is truly impressive how it describes the whole process of the Vatican in World War I and World War II. and what they were trying to do. And you see, yes, the fantastic posture, in this case of the President of the United States. But let's see how there's been a very striking change. Remember this scene. The biblical text said, all the earth after the beast. The representatives of the United States, where are they placed here? They are not, are they? Well, they are. And not only the current President of the United States, but two of the former presidents, his father Clinton and other U.S. personalities. And in what position are they? On their knees. Hasn't something changed in the United States? The prophecy is very clear, and we will see it now. We will see how from the year 45 to the present, things have happened that transcend what no one could have imagined if the biblical prophecy had not been known in depth. The text said, but he spoke like a dragon. This is a change of attitude at some point in his history. He said he had horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. America was born in a very meek way, running away from Catholicism in Europe, and then it's going to make a change in its history. It's going to speak like a dragon. Who is the dragon, remember? Satan. Well, in spite of everything, let's remember that this prophecy says something very concrete. It paints the picture against whom? Against the authentic people of God. And we must not forget this. It is speaking here of the papacy and the United States, but above all, it is painting the picture against the authentic people of God. And it is precisely something that is already being forged, and that soon we are going to contemplate and perhaps experience. What is the speaking of a nation? The speech of a nation is precisely the acts of its legislative and judicial authorities. By those acts, the nation will disprove the liberal and peaceful principles that it expresses as a foundation in its constitution. It is the foundation of its policy and the prediction that it will end up as a dragon afterwards. It is that there will be a change there. This nation is going to do something very important. It says it will exercise all the authority of the first beast. The first beast, what authority did it have? Remember, it was a very strong power. The Vatican, throughout its history, has been an overwhelming power. Well, this power, this second beast, is going to do something similar. And what is it going to achieve then? Well, the same thing, the intolerance that the Vatican also had. Let's see another quote that tells us, and causes the earth and those who dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. This second beast causes the first beast to be worshipped. The authority of this nation will be employed to impose some observance in homage to the first beast, and that will be when? Well, after the deadly wound is healed. Let's see something here. A fait accompli. Has the mortal wound been healed? John Paul II with Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton with John Paul II, George Bush, the current president with John Paul II. If we have read the 1945 letter, this was unthinkable, wasn't it? And this is the culmination, all subject to whom? To the Vatican again. And we are talking about the USA, what a great change it has made. The prophecy foretold it, lamb, but he would speak as a dragon. And there we have it. Let's look now at a writing of the prophetess Ellen White in the book, The Great Controversy, page 591. While Satan seeks to destroy those who honor God's law, he will cause them to be accused as lawbreakers, as men who are dishonoring God and bringing judgments upon the world. What she is saying here is very strong. Misfortunes are going to be happening in this world, and somebody is going to be blamed for it. God never forces the will or the conscience, but Satan's constant resort to gain control of those whom he cannot otherwise seduce is compulsion by cruelty. Through fear or force, he endeavors to rule the conscience and to secure homage to himself. To accomplish this, He works through both religious and secular authorities, moving them to the enforcement of human laws in defiance of the law of God. Those who honor the Bible Sabbath will be denounced as enemies of law and order, as breaking down the moral restraints of society, causing anarchy and corruption, and calling down the judgments of God upon the earth. Their conscientious scruples will be pronounced obstinacy, stubbornness, and contempt of authority. They will be accused of disaffection toward the government. Ministers who deny the obligation of the divine law. She is speaking about the ministers of the gospel, the preachers. They will present from the pulpit the duty of yielding obedience to the civil authorities as ordained of God. In legislative halls and courts of justice, commandment keepers will be misrepresented and condemned. A false coloring will be given to their words. The worst construction will be put upon their motives. As the Protestant churches reject the clear scriptural arguments in defense of God's law, they will long to silence those whose faith they cannot overthrow by the Bible. Though they blind their own eyes to the fact, they are now adopting a course which will lead to the persecution of those who conscientiously refuse to do what the rest of the Christian world are doing and acknowledge the claims of the Papal Sabbath. What is the Papal Sabbath? Sunday. The dignitaries of church and state will unite to bribe, persuade, or compel all classes to honor the Sunday. The lack of divine authority will be supplied by oppressive enactments. Political corruption is destroying love of justice and regard for truth. Do you agree on this? In every country, we are told only of corrupt politicians. We see the shenanigans of politics that disgust in the end, disgust. Well, you can see how everything is coming true. And even in free America, rulers and legislators, in order to secure public favor, will yield to the popular demand for a law enforcing Sunday observance. Liberty of conscience, which has cost so great a sacrifice, will no longer be respected. In the soon coming conflict, we shall see exemplified the prophet's words. The dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ, as it can be read on Revelation 12:17. I pause here. The dragon. Do you know who he is? Satan. By symbols, the woman, biblically, there are two women, one that is pure and the other that is a great harlot called Babylon, symbol of two churches, one good church and the other that is not. And what do? Both evil powers united. They make war against those who keep the commandments of God, and among them, the commandment that stands out and has been replaced by them, as we saw last week, is the Sabbath. The Sabbath is trampled upon. Therefore, those people who keep the Sabbath are persecuted, and they are going to be accused for many misfortunes. Well, let's see a little bit, or let's ask ourselves, what is the mark of the beast? What is the 666? What is this decree that will prohibit buying and selling, which will even be accompanied by a decree of death for those who do not obey? These are very strong words. As we have seen above, the sign of papal authority, what is it? Sunday is its great mark. In ancient times, nobility or royalty did not sign documents as we do now. Decrees were sealed. Here is an image of examples of seals with specular text from Roman times. Bronze seal of Herculaneum, 1st century. Gold seal of Rome from the 3rd century. The usefulness of the seal was thus reinforced and made explicit. Let us remember that these seals were used, as Suetonius comments in the biography of Augustus, to authenticate his writings and edicts. It was used by the emperor himself in the present case, and by the type of inscription it has, the seal was used by an imperial legate in the territory. You see how things were marked with seals. It was the sign of authority. But notice how precisely law and seal go together. They cannot be separated. In a seal, we find three different things: the name or descriptive title of the person or power that used the seal, the territory it covered, and the right to govern it had. In the case of the papacy, which would it be? Let's look at it now. The name Pope, curiously, is also awarded all the titles of the emperor, king of the sun of the Roman Empire, and also adopted its sacred day. Do you remember what was the day of the Roman pagans to worship the sun? Precisely Sunday. Well, that day was adopted by the papacy. Its territory is imposed everywhere. Substitute for God is what he pretends to be. That is his right to rule, he says. Let's see now that God also has his seal. It is important that you are now seeing here. You will see why. The name Jehovah is his name or title, creator of everything. Everything is his, all the territory, heavens and earth. It is God. It is his right to rule. And if law and seal go together, where do we find the seal of God? In the commandments of God, in the law of God. Notice seal and law together. Is there any commandment in the law of God that determines what is the seal of God? Let's look at it now. Three different texts. The first one, Exodus 20, from 8 to 11, where the 10 Commandments are found. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Other versions already tell us clearly Sabbath. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and hallowed it. Another text, Exodus 31, verses 13 and 16, 17. Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations, for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And the last text, Ezekiel 20:12, and also verse 20. Moreover, also I gave them my Sabbaths, to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctify them. And hallow my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that ye may know that I am the Lord your God. Well then, what is the seal of God? The Sabbath. It is very clear. The mark of the beast, Sunday, is what is opposed to the seal of God, which is the Sabbath. The papacy has done a very clear thing. It has usurped the sacred day of God and has passed the sanctification of a very clear day of rest, the Sabbath, to Sunday. It has done the opposite of what God said. But is the Sabbath only for the Jews? You know that the Jews have traditionally always kept the Sabbath. That is why it is said in the Christian world in general that the Sabbath was only the day for the Jews. Let's see if it is only for the Jews or not. Let us see the answers precisely in biblical texts so that you can see that no one is inventing anything here. At creation, God sanctified the Sabbath and gave it to man. Adam was the first man who was living on earth. Adam was a Jew? Of course, he would be Jewish. He would be Chinese. He would be a bit of everything, because all nations have come from him, biblically speaking. Well, let's see what it says in those moments of the creation of man. Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, And he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. Let's see how Jesus did not nullify the validity of the Sabbath either. Matthew 5:17 and 18 says, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled." Let's see how Jesus also kept the Sabbath, as we can read on Luke 4:16. "And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and stood up for to read." Now we will see how the apostles were still to keep the Sabbath after Jesus had already disappeared from this planet. Notice in this text the enormous significance of this matter. Matthew 24:20. "Pray," Jesus said to his disciples, "Ut pray ye, that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day." I digress here. At what point did Jesus utter these words? Jesus was talking to his disciples, and he spoke about the destruction of the temple from which they had recently left, a magnificent temple known as Herod's temple, where the Jews went to worship, where they made sacrifices and so on. Jesus predicted to them that this temple was going to be destroyed, that not one stone would be left upon another. He said it approximately in the year 30 of our Christian era, and he was prophesying something that happened 40 years later, in 70, when the temple was razed to the ground. He told the disciples that they would have to flee because there would be a massacre, and he recommended that until that happened, they should pray to God that when they had to flee, it would not be in winter, because in winter, of course, it is not very pleasant, but neither on the Sabbath, on Saturday, because Saturday should be dedicated to much more peaceful things of worship to God. Acts of the Apostles 17. By the way, the prophecy, or rather, the prayers of the apostles worked well, because their flight was during the week, on a Wednesday, and it was not in winter, so they could be saved. Acts of the Apostles, chapter 17, verse 2. "And Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the Scriptures." Paul also kept the Sabbath, as we can see. Acts of the Apostles, chapter 18, verses 1 to 3. "After these things Paul departed from Athens, and came to Corinth, and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy, with his wife Priscilla, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them. And because he was of the same craft, he abode with them, and wrought. For by their occupation they were tent makers." Verse 4 says, "And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath, and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks." Yet another example of how they were still keeping the Sabbath. And what is this Sabbath keeping? Observing the Sabbath. At what time? From when until when is it necessary to keep the Sabbath? From 12 to 12, as we know the days today. Leviticus 23:32. "It shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and ye shall afflict your souls. In the 9th day of the month, at even, from even unto even, shall ye celebrate your Sabbath." Although here it speaks of other festivals of the Jewish people, for them it was always the same. The feast went from evening to evening, from the time the sun sets on Friday until it sets on Saturday evening. All those hours are the Sabbath, and that is the way the Sabbath should be observed. Mark 1:32 tells us, "And at even, when the sun did set, they brought unto him all that were diseased, and them that were possessed with devils." At what time do they bring the demoniacs to Jesus? During the Sabbath? No, when the sun has already gone down. Notice that even in this they were scrupulous in keeping the Sabbath, perhaps sometimes excessively, because they were a little overdoing it, but they were very clear that the Sabbath was from sunset to sunset. And now a text that is extremely surprising. You know, In eternity, when the history of mankind has ended, and there are still prophecies that speak of this that go beyond, what will happen to the Sabbath? Because there will still be Sabbaths. There will still be weekly cycles. Notice this amazing prophecy from the book of Isaiah, chapter 66, verses 22 and 23. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass, that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. Therefore, the Sabbath has a transcendence that goes from the origin of the world and will be preserved for eternity. As we have seen, there has never been a change of that. Therefore, the oppression of the beast will be the imposition of Sunday, substituting God's Sabbath and forbidding to buy and sell to whoever does not want to accept it. Therefore, the Sabbath, according to the prophecies, will be the point of the great end-time conflict, and it is what will define who is of God and who is not. This is the key to what is going to happen in the world very soon. The prophecy announces that the beast, the second beast, the one with two horns, which is the United States, will give power to the first beast, the papacy, and the United States as a strong power. What will it do? Well, it will force, through civil laws, the observance of Sunday as a day of rest at a general planetary level. And this is the gestation of the prophecy for its fulfillment, which we see before us and is going unnoticed. Soon, it will be what will set the tone for all the people of this world, all without exception. We are going to see now a writing of Ellen White that prophesies according to the Bible. In her book, The Great Controversy, page 445, pay attention to the details she gives here. When the leading churches of the United States, uniting upon such points of doctrine as are held by them in common, shall influence the state to enforce their decrees and to sustain their institutions, then Protestant America will have formed an image of the Roman hierarchy, and the infliction of civil penalties upon dissenters will inevitably result. This is no joke. This is what America is going to do. And you see the movements will go through all the mainline churches in America. And if you follow the news, from now on, I guess you are going to do it. You will be very attentive to what is happening in that country at the religious level that is going to move the politics, and it is doing it. We are going to see now also here the continuation, where it tells us, the beast with two horns causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. The third angel's warning is, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. The beast, mentioned in this message, whose worship is enforced by the two-horned beast, is the first, or leopard-like beast of Revelation 13, the papacy. The image to the beast represents that form of apostate Protestantism which will be developed when the Protestant churches shall seek the aid of the civil power for the enforcement of their dogmas. The mark of the beast still remains to be defined. Well, perhaps we will only understand a little more all this catastrophic news concerning the alleged climate change, which we are going to discuss in a conference to see what is behind all this. But you can see that the misfortunes are going to hang on someone. Who? Those who keep the Sabbath. Look at this news item. Do you remember it? Last week, we took the video of the news that came out on TV3. Here it is summarized. It tells us about religion and timetables in Germany. The debate with the commercial schedules is mixed with other components not strictly economic, religious, for example, in Germany. Other prophecies tell us that the United States will be the place where this Sunday law will come out, but that in other Christian countries exactly the same thing will happen. You can see how everything is being prepared, and now we are going to see something that is significant. And here we will end today's lecture. A curiosity. In astronomy, we have left some signs that have an equivalence that is really pagan. Well, first we are going to see this. Do you remember the Illuminati New World Order game? On its day, we had a conference dedicated exclusively to this, where we saw the attack on the Twin Towers, September 11th, the Pentagon, etc. And those letters give impressive messages. And among them, what do we see here? What is this? Plague of demons. Where are they? This is the United States, the capital. Why does it put this here? But next to it, Vatican City. And notice, you remember we showed that letter before. The Pope, what is he wearing on his mitre, on his head, on that cap? The triangle with the eye. These two powers together are the ones that are going to make the world pass by his criterion. And that criterion is going to be to impose Sunday as a day of rest for all. And we are going to finish precisely. Well, here is something else about Ellen White that is really impressive. Shall we leave it for the next day? No? 5 more minutes? Well, shall we take advantage of the time? Let's make the most of it, and we'll close. The United States is the power represented by the beast with lamb-like horns. And this prophecy will be fulfilled when the United States shall enforce Sunday observance, which Rome claims as the special acknowledgement of her supremacy. But in this homage to papacy, the United States will not be alone. The influence of Rome in the countries that once acknowledged her dominion is still far from being destroyed, and prophecy foretells a restoration of her power. I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. In both the Old and the New World, the papacy will receive homage in the honor paid to the Sunday institution that rests solely upon the authority of the Roman Church. That is, the United States, but also Europe. The assertion will be repeated that the judgments of God will fall upon men in punishment for not having observed Sunday as a day of rest. The assertion that God's judgments are visited upon men for their violation of the Sunday Sabbath will be repeated. Keep the climate change in mind. These are the astronomical signs that I mentioned before. You see the first one on the left, the sign of the sun, astronomical sign of Sunday. The second, the third, Venus. Do you see the little drawing, that famous downward cross coming out of a little round one? It is Venus, or Friday. And on the fifth, the little round one with the little arrow diagonally upwards to the right, Mars, or Tuesday. Even in the astronomical sign, the sun appears as Sunday. You see how everything is in the culture and comes precisely from the place that is called the beast. Everything comes from there. Well, the subject that we are going to follow next day, all ready to finish, is precisely to break down entirely the 666. We have seen things about it before. Now we will finally know what it is. Well then, thank you very much for your attention. I know that today's topic has been dense, a little hard to assimilate because there was a lot of text, but it is a concept that should be very clear to you. Soon, be attentive because the prophecy will be fulfilled. Be attentive because laws will come out favoring Sunday as a day of rest and unity of Christianity in general. And if you already know what it is, will you accept that law or will you keep the Sabbath, which is the seal of God? Because in the end, there will be no alternative. We will leave it here. Thank you very much.